All right, so let's take a look at what we're asked to do in project 6. And in this project, you're asked first to sort through or to process a list and add only the even numbers. So all of this stuff up here, all this does is it creates a random list of integers between 1 and 100, and the list has 10 elements in it. And so this is that list right now. And so what we want to do is we want to just go through that list. And so we might do something like for I in my list, and that's going to go through. And if all I wanted to do was print I, it would go through and it would take every single element from this and it would print it out. But let's say that I actually only wanted to print the even numbers. So I would say for I in my list, I need to check if I %2 equals 0. That means when I divide the particular number by 2, do I get a remainder of 0? If so, then it's even. Then I'm going to print I. Okay, so it only found 3 numbers that were even in this list: 32, 94, and 88. Okay, so what I need to do is I need to have a variable that stores the running sum that will get increased each time I encounter an even number. So we'll call that just run sum, and we'll set it equal to 0 initially. So again, we'll run through the list, and we'll say if I %2 equals 0, I want to not print it now. I want to take run sum and I want to add it to, I want to increase it by I. So I want to take what was already in run sum and I want to add I to that. Okay, so now when I've run that, I want to say, well, what is in run sum? It has the value 214. It added 32 and 88 and 94 and came up with 214. So that's how you would run through the list. You would find only the even numbers and you would add them to a running sum that you would initially set to have a value of 0. Okay, so that's task 1. In task 2, the idea is that you are going to take this list and you're again going to run through the elements in the list. Except in this case, we also want to keep track of where in the list that it is, because what we want to do is when we run this, we want to reorder this list so that it's in order from smallest to highest. So the way we're going to do that is we're going to look at every pair of values, and if the first number is bigger than the second number, we're going to change their places. So here we would, for example, go 79 and 32, and we would switch them. We would go 32 and then the 79 would be in the second place. And then the 79 would be before the 94, which is right, but the 94 before the 45 would be wrong, so we would swap the 94 and the 45. And the way that we can do that is we can say, let's say my list, let's say we want to swap the 94 and the 45. So my list 2 is going to call up the 94, and my list 3 is going to call up the 45. So the way we can swap them is we can say my list 2, comma, my list 3 equals my list 3, my list 2. Okay. Now when I look at my list, we can see that the 45 and the 94 have swapped places. So Python has this very easy way of redefining two things at the same time. It redefines mylist2 as having the value that's currently mylist3, and it does the same for mylist3, giving it the value that is currently mylist2. So you'll need to go through the list here, but instead of numbers, we're going to have let's say for I in range, and the number here will be the length of your list. So you could create a variable that has that, or you could just type in len mylist, but that's going to make it a little more complicated. So the first thing we'll do is we'll say something like, L equals length mylist. So we'll say for I in range L, except we don't need to check. Once we're only going to check 9 pairs of numbers if we have a 10 element list, because once we get to the 59 and the 99, we don't need to go further. So instead of saying for I in range L, we have to do for I in range L minus 1. And now we're going to say if my list I is greater than my list I plus 1, so that means we're checking one element against the subsequent element. Then we want to reverse the two. So then we want to say my list I, comma, and bracket, comma, my list I plus 1 is equal to my list, that probably won't work, my list is equal to my list, copy and paste this, it's equal to my list I plus 1, my list I. Okay. So when we run this, we now take a look at what we have. Let's take a look at my list. Okay. So what really happened here? So look at what's different from the original my list. Okay, the 32 got moved, the 45 and the 79 then got swapped, so the 45 is in the second place. So you can see a number of swaps took place, but it's not in order. What is true is that we know that the last number has to be the biggest number. Now, it was already the biggest number, and it wouldn't have really mattered if we'd had where the last wasn't the biggest already. It still would have been the biggest by the time the process was done. But we have to keep doing this. We actually have to do this repeatedly. So this process here, this loop, has to be inside another loop that will also run for as many times as we need in order to get everything in the list in order. But all that we're doing is we're just running through the list, and if I take this and I do the same process again here, then I'm going to end up with the list. It's going to be more in order, but it'll still need another run through. So every time I run this set of codes here over this list, it's going to put it closer to being in correct order. That's your task.